I want to talk about a few issues that they talked about, but you mentioned one of my favorite ones. I mean, Donald Trump railed against China when he talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and China's not even a part of that. Ben Carson railed against China when he's talking about Syria. China doesn't seem to be involved in Syria. Peter, how big a threat is China actually to the U.S., and how should we handle it? Because the candidates last night really want to go after China.
To be fair to Donald Trump, and may lightning not strike me down for saying that, his comments during the TPP part were about how the TPP is going to or not going to affect China he didn't make the claim that China is part of the TPP. In fact, he was talking about how the TPP is kind of an alliance outside of China. So I felt that Rand Paul calling him out on that was a tiny bit unfair. Ben Carson talking about the Chinese in Syria was just complete insanity. I mean, that's simply just ridiculous. He just made that up or misspoke.
Ben Carson?
in the way people. It was surprising to all of us.
He never made up offense.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, he basically said there, yeah, I lied about all that West Point stuff, but it doesn't matter. But going back to China in the real world, I believe the quote unquote threat is hugely overstated. The United States, since the end of the Cold War, has been desperately in search of a new giant threat that can support giant defense budgets that can be used to terrify the American people into supporting all sorts of stuff. Terrorism has done a great job in that capacity. We're now, 14 plus years in, and the government has managed to strip away most of the Constitution based on the terrorist threat. But on the military side, boy, there's nothing like a good old-fashioned Cold War enemy with ships and planes and aircraft carriers that we can, threaten to blow up. I think China also inherits some of the Asian economic paranoia that plagued the United States during the 1980s when Japan was going to take everything over. China is a very important country in the world. It's a gigantic economic country in the world. Its military ambitions seem extremely narrow and small, if at all. And China does not almost all, but I mean a significant amount of its trade with the United States. There's absolutely no reason for them to be worried about us or us to be worried about them. And after Japan, China holds the largest overseas portion of America's governmental debt, and it's growing. At some point may actually surpass Japan. So the economic ties are there. American companies do business. Chinese companies come to the United States. This is just the endless search for a boogeyman, and China's the one that the Republicans wanted to center on.
Well, Josh, that's a good point. We are mutually dependent on one another, but at the same time, there is some amount of, hacking and cyber warfare, as it's called. They did hack into all those millions of personnel files a couple months ago. Is China a threat, or how should we deal with them?
The thing about China, I think, is that, if you look at China as it is now, and its economy is in trouble, the population is aging, and it's not what everyone thought it was going to be 10 years ago. And so I don't know if because of that, China is a good bogeyman because it's not really that bad, and they definitely need us as much as we need them. So if a Republican is elected, I don't think, I think that we'll all be like, hey, that's just American politics, how we are. So I don't think that there's any real threat from China. The Putin stuff, though, I think is really where we have to be careful. But that's another topic I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, I think that China is struggling now, and of course they need us as much as we need them.
Well, what did you want to say about Putin?
Well, with Trump and Fiorina about Putin. First of all, I think we should all have a moment to figure out what the hell stablemates are, because that's what Trump described him and Putin as. I mean, does that mean a romance happened? Was it like Greece? I don't know.
We did have that article on Latest.com this week about Hay and that horse privates allegedly
yes.
like Hay. So we may, in fact, have been way ahead on this issue.
I think so. But I definitely think that Putin is more of a threat than perhaps we thought he was 4 years ago, and I'm afraid that if he becomes the sort of villain in the GOP's foreign policy rhetoric, I think that could absolutely exacerbate tensions now. And I don't think President Obama, despite not being an evil dictator who's failed at everything he's ever done, he has struggled in dealing with Russia and Putin, and that I think is an area where there should be some concern.